This is my third attempt at this intro for this video. All the other ones became really long-winded, and it was like 3.5 minutes before we even started talking about what the topic was. Here's the gist of what I'm trying to convey. This channel doesn't go through much, if any, effort to glamorize things, to dress itself up, to make thumbnails, to make itself more easy to consume. And that's largely because we just don't have the time or like the motivation to make any sort of return on this. We're not trying to make any money off of that. But as a result, what happens is that this content, you kind of have to dig to find it. When we started the channel, we were making a lot of like welcome to debate type videos, right? And I every now and then I think about going back and having like a video for like, hey, you've heard of debate and now you're just interested in figuring it out. Here's how you start. Here's how you figure out what type of event you want to do and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, I enjoy most working with or kind of speaking to an audience of people who really care about debate and are really trying to improve a debate but are struggling to do so. So this video is, with that in mind, kind of like the ultimate culmination of what I want to say to that audience, which is things that I teach my debaters when I'm my college debaters and have spent a lot of time thinking about. One of these concepts I want to turn into an informative speech this year, but no one's going to see this video, so it's not like I'm ruining that speech. So I want to speak to either a debater right now who hasn't been improving as much as they used to improve, or a coach who doesn't know how to help one of their students through that scenario. And what I initially wanted to do with this video, because it was such an important topic, was to split it into 2 different videos and have like infographics and editing and stuff on the screen. And I got a class starting in 1 hour and 10 minutes. Maybe I won't upload this, and I will make that eventually, but I doubt it at this point. So I'm just going to talk, and hopefully you'll listen. There's 2 reasons why people stop improving in debate. There is self-handicapping, and there's hitting the wall. And I'm going to describe both, and odds are, if you haven't seen any improvement in your debating performance, one of these is the reason why. So let's start with self-handicapping. Self-handicapping is a psychological phenomenon that has a really interesting Wikipedia article that I could read from right now and pretend I just knew all that stuff off the top of my head, but I recommend you check it out. But here's the gist of it. They did these studies where they take people, students in a class, and they give them a test that is really important. And they make the test intentionally such that people fail. And what they tell them, and they don't know that everyone failed, right? They just know that they failed. And what they tell them is, hey, you can retake the test tomorrow. But also, since you're, students at some psychology department in some school, we have we have a drug trial for this pill. We have 2 pills we have a drug trial for. And one of them is supposed to make you smarter and help you do better on the test. And the other is supposed to make you do worse on the test. So come back, take the test tomorrow, and you can also tell us which pill you want us to give you, so that we can give that to you on your way out. And what they found was, despite sort of the common expectation to the contrary, most people chose the pill that would make them do worse on the test. And not only that, but they measured the higher anxiety you had about your performance, the more likely you were to choose the pill that makes you do worse. Why is that? Why is it that the more we care about the outcome of something, the more likely we are to sabotage ourselves into having a failed outcome? Well, it has to do with the fact that our self-esteem and our personal image is on the line. Human beings form their sense of identity based on what they want to one day be, when you really think about it. Most people's sense of identity is driven by a project that they're working towards or aspiration they have, and very few people derive their sense of identity from something they once did. Maybe older people, or maybe, I don't know, we tend to have some sort of stigma around people whose like sense of who they are is a thing they once did rather than a goal they're actively trying to accomplish. Nietzsche said, being is becoming, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people. But one way that I like to think about it is that, like, you are what you're trying to become. You're not who you are. Nobody thinks of themselves as being who they are right now. Your self-image is largely motivated by what you're trying to be, which is why you often learn more about who someone is by asking them what they want to be rather than asking them what job they have right now. The thing, though, is that, like, who we are and what we want to believe about ourselves, or self-image, is incredibly precious and important to us. And risking failure risks losing that self-image. And in most people, it's more important to you to believe that you could do something than to actually do that thing. So going back to the test, right? If a student has anxiety about how well they perform in the test, most of that anxiety is stemming from wanting to believe that they're smart, wanting to believe that they're the kind of person that could pass this test. It's not as much about the test as what failing would say about them. You might be able to hear my girlfriend in the background laughing at some random YouTube video. Not at this topic. So what happens is these people will choose to handicap themselves, because then they have something to blame. When you fail a test, you can say, oh, yeah, it's because I took that pill. It's not because I'm not smart or that I couldn't do it. And this has been linked to why people party in college before major, like, tests and essays and stuff, or why people procrastinate, right? It's largely a coping mechanism that allows you to get a result and believe that you could have done better, thus maintaining the self-image of yourself as somebody who's smart and is capable. And that's a really difficult psychological barrier to overcome, because let's say you took the pill that helps you do better and you try your hardest at something and you still fail. You're forced to reevaluate who you are and what you're capable of, and that's a really deeply painful and uncomfortable experience for people. And let's not forget, we're mostly talking about kids right now. Like, the high school kids, like, so much of their experience is a social hierarchy and social comparison, and they're barely figuring out who they are right now. So it's a lot to expect of them to sort of be willing to risk that sort of personal failure and potential shame by genuinely trying hard at something and then failing. And in fact, like, kids love to call each other tryhards, right? As though it's a shameful thing to do your best at something. And a lot of that comes from the anxiety surrounding self-handicapping, which is, if you try really hard and fail, then you suck. But if you don't try at all, then you don't have to face any sort of judgment because you didn't really try. And that's the first reason why people aren't doing well in debate. They aren't trying. They don't make serious efforts to improve. And this is where you see like meme cases and people like kind of roasting each other and, oh, I didn't really even do that, or blah blah blah. You see it a lot, right? And that's people. It's a defense mechanism. It's people choosing to have the story of them be the person who, was good at debate and could have been good, but didn't really try because they had something else going on, versus risking their story being the person who tried their very hardest at debate and wasn't good enough. Which is possible, right? I'm not here to tell you that if you try really hard, I'm guaranteeing you will succeed. It's very possible that you won't. But the fact of the matter is that so few people are actually putting in that genuine effort that the people who do have a really easy time improving compared to them and being really good compared to most people in debate who are trying to like kind of meme their way out of it while maintaining their self-esteem. And it's possible that you'll try really hard and you will succeed. The second factor for why people aren't improving. So let's say you are trying your best. You're going in, you're giving it a genuine effort, and you've noticed that your tournament results have been consistent. You keep going 3-3, or you keep going 4-2, and you do more drills, you drill harder, you practice more. Nothing helps. This is what I call hitting the wall. And it happens to most debaters. It happens with basically every serious debater I've ever worked with. It's possible there's some people who never had to deal with this, but it affects most of us. And the cause of it is, when you're starting out in debate, everybody has natural strengths and natural weaknesses. So let's say when I'm starting out, one of my strengths is I'm really good at theory. And I love theory, right? And generally, like, what you're good at in debate isn't a competition of skill so much of it as a competition of your interpretation of what's important in debate. In other words, the winner of a debate is rarely somebody who has a physical ability to speak faster, and it's even rarely somebody who has more knowledge on a topic. Generally speaking, the winner is a person who has the best strategic understanding of what debate is and how to approach it. And so what you're competing at in debate is really whose concept of how a debate should be conducted is better, is more conducive to winning, is more accurate. It leads to judges making decisions in the way you expected more often. And that's also the reason why 90% of debate advice is bad, right? Like, you can learn how to get good at baseball from your little league coach, right? Because maybe they played baseball and they loved the sport, but they just didn't have the physical speed or dexterity or hand-eye coordination to compete at the highest level. But how they're asking you to hold the bat is the way the professionals do it, right? With debate, if people knew how to do it right, they would be doing well. If you really understood debate, then you would be winning. You'd be winning tournaments. You'd be getting bids, right? But most of the advice that you see in debate doesn't come from those people. It comes from the 90% of people below that. A lot of times it comes from people who don't even break at tournaments. And if they knew how to hold a bat, they'd be hitting more home runs. So you have this opinion of debate, which is forming what you're good at, because the stuff that you think is really important in debate is what you focused on. When you're starting out in debate, everybody's kind of like good at some stuff, bad at some stuff, and your strengths play a really large role. So you keep getting better at your strengths, whatever it is. Let's say theory, right? And you keep winning more and more rounds because you're getting better and better at theory. But what happens is eventually you hit a wall, and that wall is caused by diminishing returns. Every aspect of debate has diminishing returns, which is an economic concept, but pretty much like everything in life, I process it through a comparison to the game Dark Souls, or really a lot of RPGs where you get to put your stats in a certain area. And what happens is, like, there is a vitality stat, and that stat translates to your total health, but it's not a one-to-one correlation. So when you start out, every 1 point you put in vitality might give you 20 extra hit points. But as you go on and you have more and more vitality, each additional point gives you fewer and fewer health. That's the diminishing returns, to the point where once you have like 50 vitality, it's going to be a lot more helpful for you to put that next stat point in a low stat rather than in your highest stat, because the outcome is just going to be much larger. And that's what happens in debate. People have hit the point where how good you're at theory isn't helping you as much as the stuff that you're bad at is hurting you. But the downside of that, or the flip side of that, is the reason you're bad at stuff in debate is because you think it doesn't matter. So when people have hit the wall, what's really happening is they are losing over and over and over again for the same reasons. But they have this bias that this thing that they're losing because of doesn't matter. So they either get frustrated with the judging pool, or they just don't even process it. I've worked with students where they'll go to a tournament and they'll lose a certain number of rounds. Maybe they'll do well. Maybe they'll make quarters or sems, right? But they lost 2 rounds in prelims and they lost the sems. So you got, 4 to 5 ballots where they have lost. And I'll sit down and I'll read the ballots, and sure enough, the thing that I think that student is not understanding or not valuing enough is on these ballots. Like over and over again, in at least 3 of the 4, if not all 4, it'll have some version of that thing written down. I'll go to the student and I'll say, hey, why did you lose those rounds? What do you think? And they will say, I don't know. And I'll say, did you read the ballots? And they'll say, yeah, I read the ballots, but they didn't really say anything. Like, what do you mean they didn't say anything? Well, I mean, they just didn't really explain why I lost, or it didn't make sense. Okay, show me the first rounds that you lost ballot. Let's go over that. Read it out loud to me. And they'll read it out loud to me, and I'll say, what about this part? What about this sentence right here? What do you think that's about? And even then, it's kind of hard for them to make the mental connection. Improving at debate requires that you change your perception of what debate is and how it should be done. Because if you had a proper understanding of it, then that would have been all you needed to succeed. The best public forum debater does not, it's not like it's not like college policy. Even then I think this applies, but like IPDA, high school Lincoln Douglas, like high school public forum, Parley, like in most of these formats, the reason why you're succeeding isn't, or why the best people are succeeding isn't that they are faster or like better informed or they have better research than other people. It's just their understanding of how to approach a debate and what matters in debate is better informed than the people they're beating. And when they go against someone and they notice that they undervalue some important thing, they can take advantage of that. If I'm debating someone and there's all sorts of things that matter in debate, and if you think theory doesn't matter, then that's where I can beat you. If you think real substantive impact comparison doesn't matter, then that's probably where I can beat you. If you think cross-X doesn't matter, you're going to get annihilated, right? So the way to overcome the wall, where over and over again you keep getting the same results, is one, be coachable, which is another video we made. That's the most important quality a debater, like that we're coaching, can have, is coachability. Like I just started a new semester and we have some competitors that have high school experience, and that makes me nervous because I'd way rather work with a completely new competitor than with somebody who has this like previous biases and previous understandings of debate that I now have to overcome or maybe like fight with them on. But if you're watching this, you probably don't have a super great coach, or maybe you do and you're just not listening to them, but assume you don't, right? What you need to do is you need to very carefully and very honestly examine all of your losing ballots and maybe even show it to other people. Show it to somebody who's not you, a former competitor, maybe not a friend who shares the same understanding of debate, because, or maybe a better competitor than you. Have someone else take a look and just identify commonalities. And you'll be surprised, like, if the problem is you're going too fast, but you don't think going too fast is bad, how many of your ballots will just say, I think you went too fast, or you were too aggressive, or maybe you went too slow. Or like when I hit the wall, when I was a competitor, what it was for me is I thought that like when I was responding to arguments, one refutation ought to be enough. I was like, I had one refutation, they didn't disprove it, like why isn't that good enough? Why should I have to make a second refutation or a third refutation? And what I had to realize, and what other people have to realize, is the judge is never wrong. It can be a bad judge. It can be a judge that shouldn't have been hired. But first of all, 99% of the case, that's not true. If your judge falls asleep in the round, yeah, they're a piece of shit. But if the judge is making an effort to judge the round, there is no such thing as a bad judge or a judge that is wrong. The win condition of debate, the entire point of the game, is to convince the judge to vote for you. And if you think you won a round, but the judge was wrong and didn't vote for you, then you are not understanding or appreciating what the game of debate is actually about. The game of debate is convincing that person to vote for you. And whatever persuades that person is what you needed to do. It also has goals of being educational. It also has goals of practicing logic and stuff like that. And hopefully you're getting a judging pool that values those things. So what you would need to do to persuade them is to be whatever these things. But the fact of the matter is that your job is not to decide whether your judge is valid or not. You could choose not to compete at a tournament or in an event that has judges you don't like, but once you've made that decision, your job is to convince that person to vote for you. And what that means is you can't impose your ideas of how they should make their decision. And the more you do that, the less you're actually engaging with what they are going to be persuaded by. And a lot of times these people represent the majority of the judging pool or the majority of society, right? Like, what are we teaching people if the majority of debaters are complaining about the majority of judges like not making decisions right? In what way are we teaching these people to be persuasive if what they're coming away with is most people are making their decision wrong and they should have been persuaded but they weren't? Like, what is that going to do for you ever in life? Other than, I don't know, being a conservative pundit that complains a lot and makes QAnon videos. So that's my advice. If you haven't been improving in debate, my advice is to examine whether you are putting in a genuine effort, whether you even want to improve in debate. If you want to improve in debate, admit that to yourself. Examine whether you're putting in a genuine effort or whether you've been trying to cushion yourself from a negative, embarrassing outcome of trying really hard and not succeeding. Then you can examine whether that's worth it. I'm not here to tell you that like you should be embarrassed and that's okay. That's your life, you know? But let's say it is, and you do care, and you do want to do well, and you are willing to risk the failures along the way. What you then need to do is understand that if you understood the game of debate, accept that if you understood the game of debate very well, then you would be performing very well. Given that you're not performing very well, or as well as you want to be, that means that you don't understand the game of debate very well or as well as you need to in order to have the results you want. And that's all there is to it. Once that happens, you need to identify where that lack of understanding is, what the disagreement between you and your judging pool is, and then give a genuine effort to reconcile that. Ask people how to reconcile that in very specific ways, and you almost always will. That's all from me for now. I just watched back that previous recording, and I do want to add one addendum, right? I don't mean to erase or fail to acknowledge structural barriers in the way of some people in debate being given fair treatment and fair opportunities by judges. A lot of debaters of color, and certainly like women debaters. In fact, that's another speech that we're also running this year on my college team. But I think there are structural solutions and structural things that we should be doing for those problems, but in a given round, right? I think what I said still applies. If you are a debater where you feel that the barriers to you succeeding have been like unfair and structural problems, there's very little you can do about that in a given round against a judge that isn't receptive to listening to those sorts of issues. So in a debate by debate case, you sort of do need to approach it as, well, what do I have control over, right? So that's not to say that the judges with problematic views that bias them towards certain kinds of debaters don't exist. They do, and it's a major structural problem which I'm actively doing research to explore solutions for, because it's a problem that's existed in orchestra and chess and tennis and all sorts of different activities, and there's been various degrees of interesting approaches and solutions. But as someone who is looking at their performance and trying to focus on what they can do to improve that performance, I think you do need to adopt a perspective of, well, what do I have control over? What can I do? In which case, yeah, I think the best that you can do is try to figure out how you can best adapt to your judge, rather than, in the context of that debate, when it's already happening, just hope that judge becomes a different judge or no longer is your judge. Once it's your judge, if you're trying to win, then you have to appeal to that judge. But yeah, now I think that's everything. Rate, comment, and subscribe. Okay.